credit goes to Donnie Patterson. But he came up with that play. He said, when they go into the double eagle, and if the tight end turns out like he's going to block, the linebacker rushes, and there's nobody covering him. We're playing Ohio State at Columbus. We worked all week on that being an audible because they had to be in this certain defense. Was it Matt Rogers, I think? Was it the black helmet game or not?
Yeah.
It was always an audible. All of a sudden, we hear Hayden call that play from the sideline. And we're going, no, you can't do that. You can't call it because we don't know what they're going to be in. Because if they're in a regular front, it's not going to work. Sure enough, at the last second, they substitute. And they go into that front and that defense. And the rest is history. And he was wide open. And Coach Fry, this is one thing, he was great. He always knew how to turn something around. He said, hey, I knew what they were going to do. I knew that. What do you guys get so upset about? Oh. But it was a heck of a play. And Alan Cross went all the way.
Welcome to the Gallery and Hurley Unfiltered podcast, Iowa Football Rewind.
Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast player to get a behind-the-scenes look that you won't find anywhere else.
Today's guest is someone who played a big role in our early days at Iowa, Coach Dave Triplett. He was our special teams coach during our first 2 years in the program and a guy who brought energy, discipline, and plenty of stories to every meeting and practice. Long before that, he wore the black and gold as a player and later helped build the Hayden Fry era. We're excited to catch up with Dave Triplett and take a trip down memory lane. Enjoy. Let's start out talking about your recruiting back in the day as a player, how that was.
Yeah.
Talk about schools you were looking at. Talk about that if you would.
I went to high school in Des Moines at Dowling High School where it was all boys. And since I was in seventh grade, when I was the quarterback and head coach of our seventh grade team, I wanted to be a coach. And I was always interested in history. So I thought naturally I'll be the history teacher, social studies teacher, and a coach. I was looking for large universities or liberal arts where I could get that done. My high school career, I broke my collarbone twice, freshman year and junior year, so I didn't play much. In my senior year, I had a decent year. And was not recruited heavily, you and I and Drake, because I didn't play a lot. But
Drake Division I back then?
They weren't at that time, but they were in the NBC, which was
Okay.
very competitive, and they went Division I after that. It was a good local team. They did well. They played Iowa State every year and competed well against Iowa State. And then Northern Iowa was a good school. But I was looking hard at KU or Iowa because I had an interest in those schools. And my grandfather played at Iowa, 1916 and 17, so I had a connection there. He played football and ran track at Iowa. And of course, the Hawkeyes were, when I was growing up, I was born in 1950, so the glory years of Evashevsky and that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to go to Iowa, and it's crazy. My senior year, towards the end of the year, I had some good games. And this was back when they could offer 65 scholarships. And so for a number of reasons, with my high school coach's help, I was able to get a scholarship at Iowa, but it was part football and part track. You could do that back then. You could mix scholarships. You can't do that anymore. So I came to Iowa, part football, part track. And I know Coach Kretzmeyer used to give me hell, saying, come on, Triplett, you should be out running. You're not doing any track. But he was a good guy. And anyway, so I came to Iowa and started a history degree program and coming to Iowa. So my recruiting was much different back then. I came to a couple games, one football game, and then I came to a couple basketball games at the old field house. The coaches came by maybe once or twice, and I understand I was not tops on their list. And then they could take us out to dinner, so we went out to dinner a couple times. Anyway, it ended up, back then I signed my scholarship with Iowa, and it was a great opportunity for me and probably the 4 of the greatest years of my life.
Was there a red shirt back then, or what were the rules on freshmen?
The Big Ten was always a little bit behind the other schools in the country.
This is 1968 was your first year?
Graduated 68 to 72. But see, the Big Ten did not have athletic scholarships till maybe the early 60s. In the 50s and maybe early 60s, they did not have football scholarships. They had different types of support, and the Iowa Scholarship Fund was one way to do it. And then the Big Ten allowed them to have football scholarships. There was no redshirting, only came about if you got injured. That was the only way you could be redshirted. And a couple of my teammates were, and they played a fifth year because they sat out the whole year. You had a freshman team. We played 2 games. We played Northwestern and Iowa State. They split those. And then my sophomore year, I remember playing a handful of games. I was a receiver and didn't do much. My junior year, I played a little bit more as a junior, as a receiver. I remember we were playing USC at Kinnick, and it was 3rd down, and the coach put me in, and I was shocked that he put me in on 3rd down because the guy ahead of me was pretty good, but his helmet had come apart. So I went in, and it was 3rd and 9, and not only was I shocked to be in, they called my route. I was the primary receiver. So I ran down and ran a great hook, but I only ran 8 yards. And so we had 4th and 1. And that was my first real play where I was involved. My hand was shaking in the turf. And then my senior year, I played a lot more. We switched coaches during my senior year. That's when Ray Nagel left and Frank Lauterbur came in. And that's a whole different story. It was not the glory years of Iowa football. We were 1-10. We beat Wisconsin. We could have won a couple other games.
It said you had 7 catches and 157 yards against Wisconsin.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good game.
It was, and that was a big deal. We had one play set up when they put a backup corner in, and they punted to us, and the ball went in the end zone. So it's a touchback. We got the ball to 20. I don't realize it, but the corner's in the game, and then the quarterback, Frank Sutterman, says, "Okay, Trip, here it is. Here it goes. We're going to throw it." And it was a post route. And I ran right by him and caught it, ran 80 yards for a touchdown. And that was a big deal. And then I had a bunch of other catches. And later on, it got down to where we were driving to try to score to go ahead. And we had a 3rd and 10. And I ran an out cut right in front of our bench. And it was over my head. But the guy bumped him into me. And boy, I took a fall. I flopped real big and rolled. And sure enough, that flag came out. And we got the penalty and ended up going in and winning the game.
Nice.
That was how we won it. But that was the peak of my career for that day. But that was good. And then I stayed as a GA for a year after that.
Was that the plan to stay on as a GA, or you were hoping for that?
I wanted to learn how to get some coaching experience. And plus I wanted to get a master's degree in social studies. So I went that first year and I was a grunt GA and did all the grunt work. And
What was that back then? What kind of work was that? Breaking
it was
down film?
breaking down film and then getting the scout team ready, getting all the plays ready for the scout team. I helped run the scout team offense. And that was pretty much like anything, any scout team are going to get beat up and always catch hell from the varsity defensive coaches because we weren't giving them a good look. And but it was fun. I was also an RA in the dorm at Hillcrest. I had Trowbridge House. My room was N107, so I had. Now this is how crazy it was. I had all the freshman football players on the same floor. And talk about putting all the crazy guys in one. It was a little different. That was the first and last time they ever did that. Miss Van she had a tough time. Did you guys live in Hillcrest at all?
Ooh, they moved us. By that time, we were over in Slater.
Oh,
and I think they had we were all on one floor, I think, 7th floor or something. And then the other grades were 1st or 2nd floor.
Yeah, but I imagine you guys are you're under better control.
Better, probably.
Not so much.
Yeah.
I don't know why they thought that was a good idea. Dude, we don't want you guys living off a campus to get in trouble. I was like, you know how much trouble happens to you? All of us together, like in one confined area?
Yeah.
It's funny you say that. We talked with a guy who was on our team for a while, Matt Wannett. And he said his dad's roommate, right?
So I stayed in the dorm for 2 years, my freshman, sophomore year as a regular student. And it's funny, when I'm working on campus a couple of times, I walked over there and walked into the dorm at Hillcrest and walked into my old room or knocked on the door. And here's this old guy, 65 years old, knocking on the door of these kids' dorm room, W202 in Hillcrest. Hey, this used to be my dorm room. They didn't really bite it. Anyway, Tom, so then we could move off campus. So my junior and senior year, we rented a house over on Muscatine, like 7 of us. And when we moved off campus, I don't want to give you the old generations ago financial sob story, but we got a check each month for $123. And that was our room and board. And so we paid the rent for that. And I was in charge of getting the phone bills and the gas bill and everything. We didn't have a TV. It was just regular TV. And then you probably had about $50 left over for your meals. But yeah, so I lived there for 2 years and then went back in as a graduate coach. Yeah, so living in the dorms was fun. I enjoyed it. It was a little bit different as a GA, but yeah, it was a good deal. And they were just building. They were called Reno 1 and Reno 2. Had just been built when I was there. Hillcrest and Quadrangle were the big men's dorms on the west side.
So that whole area just exploded, didn't it? They built across the road. They built the hospital, all that stuff. So that must have been an interesting thing to see back then, right? With all those buildings gone. And just there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was just the field house was there, and there was one building, major building for the hospital. They started to go a lot bigger and grow faster. The rec building, which is now, I don't know what they do in the rec building, that was being built when I was a freshman and sophomore. And our old practice fields were where Carver Hawkeye is now. Mine used to be 18 holes. There was the lower Finkbine and upper Finkbine. And up above, then taken over football and practiced up there. And now that's where Carver Hawkeye is and the dental school is. And then lower Finkbine, that 9 holes, that stayed there for a long time. That's where the track is and the women's softball and stuff like that. But that was lower Finkbine. And then when Evie got here, he liked to play golf. So they closed that down and they built Finkbine out farther west where it is now. It was owned by the Finkbine family. So yeah, out there wasn't much at all. And then that just went crazy. And yeah, you know how it is. It's gone all the way out to Tiffin. So yeah, grown fast.
You mentioned Evie. So you were there with Nagel and Evie fighting and boycotts and all that stuff. What do you remember from that time?
The Evie Nagel thing, we did not know all the insight. But getting back to what I was talking about scholarships, he set up a deal with some of the guys in the state, the Iowa Scholarship Fund, and that's how he helped fund some scholarships.
These are like donations from people to help bring players in that could pay their tuition. Is that?
It was that vintage's version of NIL, however you want to call that.
Sounds like it.
So when Ray Nagel came in and he was building the program, there was some controversy that he wasn't getting the same amounts of money that he needed, and Evie controlled that. And it was too bad. So spring going into my junior year, it came to a head, and Evie fired Nagel, thinking that if he fired after spring ball, then the president would have nothing to do. But he wanted to be head coach and athletic director, and that didn't go. So that's when Nagel coached one more year. Bump Elliott came in as athletic director and took over. And then Nagel left. Nagel was a good man, and that was a tough deal. The boycott probably had a bigger impact because of all the players that left as a result of that. And it was a tough time. It was Vietnam and all the stuff going on campus, and the African-American kids are trying to find their identity and find their role on campus. And I would say that they had a legitimate grievance then, and looking back now, because there was not a lot of help for them when they got here. And so there was, I think if we had 24 African-American kids, one spring, about 20 of them boycotted spring practice. And maybe you know all this. Have you heard all this?
No, I've heard bits of it, but I think a lot of people don't know that story very well.
They were talking to people on campus. You got to fight the man. Don't let him put you down. And some of it was right, and I understand that. So 20 of them boycotted. And back then, coaches didn't know how to handle that. Coaching was one way. And so Ray Nagel said, if you don't come out for spring ball, you're done. And so only 4 kids came out for spring practice. And then he said, if you want to come back, you've got to come back in the fall and petition your teammates to come back. Now, the tough thing was with 20 kids, there was 5 or 6 starting defenders. 3 out of 4 of the defensive backs and the linebacker and defensive tackle didn't even bother to come back, and they were good players. And then If you can imagine the first day of 2 days, we had a team meeting, and each one of the kids that wanted to come back on had to get up in front of us and as a judge and jury and plead their case. And that was a tough deal. And a number of them voted back on. There was a couple that we didn't. So it just, not only did we lose some good players, it just did not help the team camaraderie going into that last year. And I think we ended up 3-8. And after that, Nagel left. So it was a tough deal. I'm not saying those are excuses, but there's a lot of things off the field that hurt the program, prevented it from really moving forward. So then Frank Lauterbur came in. I was there for a year, and then I had an opportunity to get a head job in Davenport at Assumption, so I went there as the head coach. I was there for 2 years in 73 and 74. Probably the best thing about that is I met my wife, and her brother was on the team, and I had their sisters in class, and I met her one night. And that's probably the best thing that happened to me at Assumption. I was there a couple of years, then I went to Heelan in Sioux City, which back in those days was a power 4A team. Walked into a pretty good deal there. Good players, a bunch of good assistant coaches, good program. And so in 75, I was there 75 and 76, and we were state champs in 75. We played my old high school and my old coach. They beat us once, and we beat them in the playoff game. And then we played West Waterloo at Kinnick for the championship.
I saw that. Yeah, that must have been pretty wild experience to be back
It
coaching
was.
at Kinnick.
I'm one of the few coaches who's undefeated in Kinnick as a head coach.
Yeah.
We beat West Waterloo, and that was fun. And then we had another good year. After my first year there, I had a chance to talk to Bob Cummings, who just took over the Iowa job. And I said I'd be interested in coming back and coaching. He said, well, maybe you could stay up there and help us recruit. So he didn't hire me. I took another year in Iowa, and we had some good players. John Hardy played for me at Heelan, who was a great player in Iowa. Another kid by the name of Mike Corey, who was a quarterback who went to Notre Dame. So we finished those 2 years, and then I ended up getting, with the help of my old head coach who had gone to Iowa State, I got a job at Iowa State with Earl Bruce. That was my college job, and that was 78 and 79, 77, 78.
A bowl game.
We went to two, and that was when they inaugurated the Iowa State rivalry.
Oh, that's right.
So in 77 was the first game.
Oh,
We got beat 12-10. Iowa won 12-10. And then the next year we went back, beat them pretty good. We had a good year. We were 8-3, and then we ended up going to the bowl games. And then Earl was an Ohio State grad and coached at Ohio State. The year Woody Hayes punched the kid from Clemson on the sideline. If you ever heard that story, he got fired. And Earl Bruce applied for the job. And I didn't know about this. And so we had a recruiting meeting on a Sunday, and he said, I've applied for the Ohio State job. I've got a 1 in 3 chance of getting it. If I get it, I want you all to come with me, but you're going to have to tell me right away. So that was on a Sunday. The next Thursday, I'm up recruiting in Wisconsin. And back in those days, you didn't have cell phones, so you had to call in once a day from a payphone. And you had some kind of number that you could use. So I'm calling in, and the secretary said, Earl Bruce wants to talk to you. So he said, Dave, I got the Ohio State job. I need to know by noon tomorrow if you're coming with me. And my wife we had the twins at Ames, just had the twins. And I'm saying, oh man, I don't know if I want to do this. So I turned him down. He thought I was crazy, and who knows what hindsight says, but I stayed, finished recruiting. Donnie Duncan took over at Iowa State, but then the South Dakota job came open, and I took that, and we went to Vermillion. We were up there for 10 years, and that was a great time. I enjoyed that very much. Great people up there. Pretty much everywhere I've gone, I've had great coaches to work with. And most coaches would tell you, after it all, it's the players, guys like you and Nick and everybody else that you remember. And that was certainly something that happened in South Dakota. And they had won the conference championship the year before I came. So I immediately turned the program around to a 5-6 team. But anyway, we started to build it and do well. And some things haven't changed. Back then, it was North Dakota State was the power in that conference. And we beat them a couple of times, but they beat us. And we finally ended up going to the playoffs, played North Dakota State in the national championship in 85. And then 86, I think. They ended up beating us. But it was a good season. And then I had a couple more. I thought, we've been there 10 years. It was time to go. So I heard from one of my classmates and teammates, Bob Elliott, that there was a job possibly coming open in Iowa, because that was when Bill Snyder was thinking about going to take the Kansas State job.
All right.
Got on that, and Bill got the job. He was going to stay through the bowl season. And with the help of Bobby and Dan McCartney, who were teammates of mine, they were a couple years below me, but we'd stayed in touch. I got an interview with Hayden, and that was, even though I'd been a head coach, and that was something he was concerned about. Can you do this? Can you go from head coach to an assistant? Which I thought I could. You know, he offered me the job, and I took it, and I was very grateful for that opportunity. And it was a great thing because we could move back closer to my home and Mary Ann's home in Davenport. The kids loved Iowa City. It's been great for us ever since. And I coached the tight ends for a couple of years. I had some good players, Michael Titley and our current NATO ambassador, and Alan Cross. And they were all good guys. I enjoyed coaching them. Alan was a walk-on. And I remember one of the things Hayden did was good. I liked was at the end of every spring, if we had a couple scholarships open, he would always ask the coaches, is there anybody that you have that might be deserving of a scholarship? Any walk-on? And so I mentioned Al Cross, and they all laughed at me. And he was only like 6'3", 190 pounds back then, but he was a very coachable guy and turned out to be a player. And so I enjoyed that. And then after 3 years, we had some changes. John O'Hara, God rest his soul, passed away, and Carl Jackson left. So we had some openings. And so I applied for the running back job and got that. Also, I became special teams coach, which was maybe the biggest highlight ever of my career.
Possible.
Oh, but I remember, Nick, when I went up to your guys' place to watch you play, I think you were a senior.
I dropped like 3 passes.
Yeah.
We threw on the ball like 5 times out of the season. I dropped 3.
But the biggest thing, I'll never forget this, is when I was standing down there watching you punt, and I could not only watch you, but I could hear it coming off your foot. So I knew there was some power there. And of course, you came from a great family, and Hayden sure liked that stuff. So that worked out. That was a great trip. I never driving up there all on a Friday night and driving all the way back, but it was fun. We enjoyed it. And then I had Hurls, Brion as a punter, ended up being a kicker too. Yeah, you guys are part of that. I was fortunate to have some good kids like you guys. And then there are some exciting moments that weren't so good. I remember I had a punter, his name will be nameless. We're playing Indiana, and we're on the sideline, and it's 4th down. And one of the things as a special teams coach, you're always go crazy. When the huddle, they're looking at you and they're yelling, we're short somebody, and they're waving their arms. And I'm going, Paul Longo. You remember Paul Longo?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So he was always good about getting them ready. I'm looking at Paul, what's going on? I look to my left, and he goes, and I look to my right, and guess who's standing next to me? The punter. And so I take 2 steps, and he looks at me, and he sees my face, and he knows, yeah, I'm the guy. And frankly, I hate to tell you this, I went to grab him, and my phone took me back, but he was gone by then. But anyway, that was a thrill a minute. So it was, yeah. But so I enjoyed coaching the running backs and the special teams, and I was there 6 years, enjoyed it very much. But I had an opportunity. I got to give my wife and kids credit. They enjoyed it. Like, if you ask my kids their favorite Christmas, it's not they got this toy or that toy. It's the year we went to the Rose Bowl. That was their favorite Christmas. And my wife, she put up with all that and did all the work. But I had this opportunity. I figured this might be my chance. So that's when I thought about getting out and staying in Iowa City, because it's a great town and we loved it. But still helping the university, my alma mater, and I want to do whatever I could to help it. But doing something different. So I applied for a fundraising job, and that was good. I'll never forget back in the days when we had date books, and I took that job, and I'm looking at my date book, and I'm looking at all the weekends where there's nothing. And for the first time in my life, all the nights I'm free. Now, my wife had to get used to it. I had to get used to it, but we enjoyed that. And it was really not much different. So instead of traveling to go to people's houses to recruit them and their sons to come to Iowa, I'd go to their houses and talk to them about their financial support of the university. So the same thing. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's great. I do have, let's rewind quick to Iowa State.
Yeah.
My uncle played there, John Less,
Yes,
linebacker.
he was a great
I just made that connection that you guys might have
community.
Really?
And he was like you, Nick. He didn't say much either. He was quiet he didn't say much at all. But John Less, he was a pretty good looking physical specimen. And I forget the other linebacker's name, maybe. But yeah, we had a good defense, very solid defense. And yeah, John Less, great guy.
Made that connection that you guys would have been maybe at the same time. That's amazing. Yeah. Where did you guys went to a bowl game in Alabama or someplace? Wasn't it?
Blue Bonnet Bowl?
Yeah.
Does that sound right? Blue Bonnet or
we played Texas A&M, and then
Tangerine Bowl?
No, it was the Freedom Bowl or something. I can't remember. It was in Birmingham, Alabama, and we played Texas A&M.
Oh, Alabama. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then the year before that, we'd gone to the Peach Bowl and played NC State. The tough thing was, most people didn't know this, Iowa State, as an ag school, they were on the quarter system because the kids who were working on the farm, they'd need to be home during the spring and fall. So though there was a spring quarter, a summer quarter, a fall quarter, a winter quarter. And so the way that impacted football is that you'd play in the fall quarter, but then that ended right after Thanksgiving. And then you went into the winter quarter. And if you had a bad fall quarter and you're ineligible, you were ineligible for the winter quarter. So we had in both those games a handful of players, some good ones, who couldn't play in the bowl game. See, at Iowa and other semester schools, like Iowa State's a semester school now, you would play your bowl game in the first semester or towards the end of that, or maybe even in the break over the time. But that hurt us in both those bowl games because we had some kids that didn't do well and were ineligible to play, and that hurt us. But A&M and NC State were both good teams.
it was a Hall of Fame classic.
Hall of Fame classic. Yeah.
I was a Hall of Fame boy. Now that's starting to ring bells for sure.
We beat Nebraska one year at Lincoln. That was a great win over there, 24-21. Our defense was pretty solid. And then the next year we went to Oklahoma and played them tough for a while, but they're a pretty good team. And then we beat Colorado, and we beat Iowa the next year, 31-7. That was a pretty good win. And yeah, both 8-3. And then after the second year, that's when Earl left. But those were good teams. And I coached, back then we divided it up. I coached tight ends and tackles because the blocking schemes included the tight ends and tackles blocking together, and the guards and centers did the same thing. So those are two fun years at Ames. But John Less was a good player.
Yeah, I think he tried the USFL for a bit, but it just wasn't for him, I think. I do remember he had this kind of bump on his nose from, I think, his helmet coming down.
Yeah.
I was always like, oh, he's one tough dude that's
Back then,
down hard.
everybody led with their head. That's how everybody led. And if you're a linebacker or offensive lineman, you're going to have this because they didn't do like they do now with the arms and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And Earl was a Woody Hayes guy, and practices were physical, and our offense is physical, and our defense is physical. Yeah. It was a different time back then. We didn't throw the ball a lot. John Less, a good player. One of the things I was going to mention, talking about players, when we played Dowling, we played Dowling in the fall of 75, there was 8 Division I players on the field. Dowling had 4 kids that went to Iowa State. Brian Neal, whose son played tight end just recently at Iowa State, Mike Schwartz, and Jack Seabrook. Dowling also had Phil Seuss, who was the first quarterback for Hayden. And then also Jim Swift, who was a tight end, a great tight end at Iowa. And then John Quinn, who played quarterback at Iowa State and headed up. He was the head of the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation for many years. And then my kid, Mike Corey, and John Hardy came to Iowa, and Corey went to Notre Dame. So there's a lot of good players on the field that day.
Let's go back to Iowa a little bit. We do have a question for you. Matt Sherman said that Coach Fry called him up to offer him a scholarship and said, it's between you and Jake Plummer. So we're going to check to make sure that that was true, or he was just like a little gamemanship there. Do you remember?
Oh, I know that we were recruiting Jake Plummer hard. John Austin was coaching at the time, and he was recruiting Jake Plummer. And I don't think Hayden ever indulged in pure outright fraud, but he'd color the edges pretty good. And we're all sitting there saying, Matt Sherman, come on, let's go. Well, we're going to turn down a scholarship to Iowa and think about it. So he ended up being a good player, and I was happy to see him be successful. I think he's up in the Twin Cities now, isn't he? You know?
He is, yeah. He works for Learfield for Minnesota sports.
Oh, does he?
People give him a hard time about wearing the colors and all that stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of quarterbacks, I was on the sideline, and there's always great sideline stories. Paul Burmeister was a quarterback, and we're playing Indiana. And all we have to do is 3rd and 3. If we can get a first down, we can run the clock out and win the game. And so Hayden called a run play. We're going to run the ball. And of course, one of our standard coaching points for the quarterbacks was if you saw a soft corner backing off, you check to a quick route. We're out in the field, our team's out in the field, and they're on about the 40. And so you can see, Paul's right there. Hayden and I are standing next to each other. And Paul starts to call the cadence. And then all of a sudden I see him look at the corner because the corner's backing off. I'm going, oh, Paul, no. And sure enough, he starts to check, 3 white 1, 3 white 1. And Hayden grabs me. What's he doing? What's he doing? And sure enough, Paul checks to the quick route, and they baited us into it. So it rolls back up, and Paul has to throw it away, and the clock stops. And all you can see, and I feel all those papers that Hayden used to have, that big thing of papers he threw them all at me. And all you can see on the film is a big flurry of papers flying in the air towards me. And Paul and I laugh about it now. I think it's funny. Back then it wasn't. But yeah, it was pretty funny. The defense stopped him and we won the game. But that was one of the funny moments. If you ever see Paul, ask him about that.
We're going to have him on actually tomorrow.
Next guy. Yeah. Funny how that works out. Yeah.
He's done a great job. He was a great kid. And yeah, I enjoyed working with him. And I see Alan Cross every once in a while. He comes in to work out.
He's in town?
Yeah, he's in
town. Okay.
Yeah. Works for the furniture place in Muscatine. But he comes into Anytime Fitness and works out. And he was a very coachable kid, and that's what helped him do pretty well. If you remember the big play against Ohio State where he's wide open by 80 yards, you remember that play? That's really, the credit goes to Donnie Patterson for that. And if you thought about having Donnie, Donnie was into analytics before analytics were a big deal. And believe me, he could talk to you for 3 hours on it. He is always a smart guy.
Talked to me for 4 hours about it just last year.
There you go. Yeah. But he came up with that play. He said, Tripp, look at this. When they go into the double leg or whatever it was, and if the tight end turns out like he's going to block, the linebacker rushes and there's nobody covering him. And so we're playing Ohio State at Columbus, and we worked all week on that being an audible because they had to be in this certain defense before Matt Rogers, I think?
Yep. Because that was the 1990 game, right?
After the shooting.
Was that the black helmet game or not?
Yeah. That was that one.
So it was always an audible. I was up in the box, and all of a sudden, and I think Donnie was there next to me in the box, we hear Hayden call that play from the sideline. And we're going, no, you can't do that. You can't call it because we don't know what they're going to be in. Because if they're in a regular front, it's not going to work. Sure enough, at the last second, they substitute. And they go into that front and that defense. And the rest is history. And Coach Fry, this is one thing, he was great. He always knew how to turn something around. He said, hey, I knew their tactics. I knew what they were going to do. I knew that. I called that. What do you guys get so upset about? Oh. But it was a heck of a play. And Alan Cross went all the way. That was a big play. I see him. So I tell you, one of the best things the Hawks do now is the legacy program. Are you familiar with the legacy program?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's great. Ben does a great job, and they do an excellent job. So I was the president of the Letterman's Club for a couple of years and very involved in the Letterman's Club. And all we ever did in the summer was have a golf out. And of course, that was all male. And what they've done now is they've made that such a family thing. If you've had a chance to come back for it, I know it's hard, but it's a great opportunity. Plus the 2 pregame socials they have during the fall. But I think that's one of the best things that they do for the Hawkeye football Letterman. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that again this summer. Ben does a good job. And I don't know whose idea that was, probably Kirk's, but it's very effective. Get a lot of people back.
Yeah, that's been great. I think us former players and Hayden players and pre-Hayden players,
Yeah.
there was a separation. I think Ferentz was trying to get his program established. And
Yeah.
it felt like there was a little disconnect there, but as he got success and had his program rolling, then I think said, let's bring in everybody back and connect it in. So that's been really cool.
Before we leave, let me just say this now. Let me give you my disclaimer. I apologize to anything I ever said or did to you guys in the heat of the moment as a coach when I was trying to get the job done. And maybe you don't remember. I think I remember some of them. As you get older, you remember these things. You're going, why did I do that? Whatever it was, when I meet old players, I'm not sure what they're going to say to me. They might say, good son of a, that. But anyway, it was coaching guys like you that made it a very enjoyable profession for me. And I enjoyed every minute of it.
Do you remember any stories, Nick?
TNT All-Star Football Camp, organized by Hawkeye legends Tim Dwight and Tavian Banks, is an annual event designed to mentor and train young athletes. The camp focuses on students in grades 3 through 8, offering them a unique opportunity to learn from 2 of Iowa's most celebrated football figures. Location historically held in Des Moines, Iowa, camp provides comprehensive football training, emphasizing skill development, teamwork, and sportsmanship. The event is not only a platform for athletic development, but also serves as an inspiration for young athletes to pursue excellence on and off the field. This camp is free for the public. For more information and updates on upcoming camps, visit their Facebook page at facebook.com/allstarfootballcamp.
Yeah, we were laughing that you had to deal with us when we were like 18 to 20 some years old. It was
Terrible.
We're like, oh God, that had to be a horrible experience for you.
Yeah. But you
You're
guys
like young kids trying to figure it out. Yeah, no clue. Right.
did a good job and played key roles at key times. That people don't understand the special teams. The only time they really get into it is when something bad goes wrong. But yeah, you both had good legs and you were reliable kids and good team players. So that's what made the difference.
I do remember one time, and it was completely justified. You did say, we were at Michigan State, and kickoffs were not very good. And you said, if this kickoff doesn't get in the end zone, you're walking home.
I said that?
You did
No,
that.
there
And I
you go. I'm
said,
sorry.
all right.
It was been a long one. So what
I
happened?
think I got it for like the 1.
Okay.
And you came up, said, where'd that land? And I said, is that the 1? All right. Well, you didn't yell at us. But that was the one time I think you got on me, and it was well deserved because I was not performing and I need a little kick in the butt.
One of the things that I always tried to get across to coach, and this was hard, we had to set periods for kicking and punting. And that's okay part of the time, but we never really simulated a real enough game-like stuff. So I finally got him to insert one in the middle of an offensive team thing. It was easier to do a field goal than a punt, but that's more a game-like situation where all of a sudden you're standing on the sideline and then you got to go out and kick a field goal or you got to punt. And anyway, that helped out a lot. Anyway, I'm glad that it worked out for you. Nick, I hope I never say anything to you that was bad.
I don't remember. I think Brian and I were young. We're trying to figure it out.
We were
We
harder
looked
on
in-
ourselves probably than any coach could be.
Yeah, we probably deserved it if you did say anything. And I don't remember any of those. And yeah, we're grateful for you believing in us and those things. You took a big chance on a couple young kids and a kind of a huge moment. Those are big moments to start.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Young
2
kids and,
freshmen
like, the
punters. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard to do.
You got a really young squad there. So it was, wow, that had to be a couple sleepless nights for you, I'm sure.
Yeah. Tell me how. So you both came in at the same time?
I walked on in 92, the year before Nick.
Super
And I don't
cool.
know how all that works with the walk-on thing. I was with Coach Austin most of my communications. And I think I met you at some point in the summer, or I got a letter from you, or I knew you from your sons from City High a little bit. So I redshirted that first year. And then the next year, Nick and I started competing for punting when he came in as a true freshman in 93. Scott Fisher had graduated 92. So it was like Todd was involved and Nick and I battled it for the first couple games. And then Nick took over.
You did most of the kicking from then on, didn't you?
I did some kickoffs. And then at the end of the year, when we went to the bowl game, I took over for place kicking. And you mentioned like getting scholarship. I was surprised that I got a scholarship at the end of that 93 season. So I'd like to thank you for that. It had anything to do with it, but I was in shock. It was a tough year, but it was very rewarding to feel like coaches were seeing some potential and making that commitment. So thank you.
I think it was pretty unanimous amongst the coaching staff that you deserved it. Yeah. And then did Todd leave? I can't remember what happened to Todd.
Todd made it all the way through. He stuck it out.
Yeah.
And he is in law school.
Oh, that's right. What's he doing now? Do you know?
He's down here close to me in Florida. He's in West Palm Beach where he grew up. And he joined his dad's law firm, I think, and has been doing that ever since. But I think I went through the Marines after Iowa.
Oh, wow.
He
I think it was a
yeah.
Jag, right? Yeah.
Oh, really?
So he's done really well. And so he's busy with all kinds of cases all over the country.
I bet so.
Yeah, we're going to have him on soon. But yeah, great guy. But he stuck through it. And I always respected Todd a lot because that's hard to do and you get beat out. But he's one of the closest friends. We were really close to each other, even though we're competing for jobs. That talks to the character of the guys we had too.
Yeah. Say hi to him for me. He was great. Good family.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
Where was your recruiting area at?
So I had Western Iowa, Nebraska, and Minnesota. Some of the guys I got.
Jed Dole is from Western Iowa.
John LaFleur?
John LaFleur, yeah. Beef. He's the head coach at Heelan now.
Sounds like he's doing well.
Yeah.
Doing really well.
His dad, you were just missed, or maybe you were overlapped a year.
His dad was a freshman when I was a senior.
Okay.
And his family, they were a long time Sioux City.
Heelan.
Yeah, guys. Yeah. The tight end from Sioux City.
Zeron?
Zeron Flemister.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Nice.
Yeah. And boy, now I see my librarian's gone to sleep. I'm trying to think out of Des Moines, the kid from Dowling. That played tackle and got drafted in the first round.
Burba.
Ross Verba.
Yeah.
He played tight end and
That's right.
and he said, Coach Triplett, am I ever going to be able to play tight end? I said, I hope this doesn't ruin us. I just need to tell you, you're just got so much potential at tackle. You're going to go to tackle. I felt bad. We moved him there pretty quick. He was not very big. And we were at Michigan State playing them. Boy, he had a tough day because the guy playing against him was a 4th or 5th year guy. But yeah, Ross came around and played pretty well. And then there was a fullback from Harlan, Michael Berger. Yep. He was a decent player. Did well. And Minnesota was the Hilgenberg kid.
Oh, Eric.
Eric. It was tough getting kids out of Minnesota and Nebraska to a certain extent. It was fun recruiting.
When Tavian came in as the running backs coach, did you have any involvement with his recruiting, even though it's Eastern Iowa?
I remember Bob Elliott and I went over there and talked to him, and I had some connections in the Quad Cities that helped. I went down to see Cedric.
We talked to Cedric. Yep. He's doing good.
And those guys are both great running backs. Tavian, there's so much natural. I had to get him to pay attention sometimes in practice. Cedric came to work every day. He was a blue-collar kid. Awfully good. Actually, I had some success my first year. I remember I went out to Long Island. I recruited some kids out of Long Island. Fritz Verkeer and Harold Jasper. Scott Fletcher in New Jersey.
Okay.
Wow.
That was a big change for me, going from recruiting South Dakota to Long Island. Yeah, but that was enjoyable.
Just saw Harold the other day, a couple weeks ago. He lives in Portland. I was out there for work. And then we just had Scott on last year.
When I was recruiting him, Coach Fry came out for home visits. So we met with Fritz and his family. They lived nearer to New York and Uniondale. And then we got done like at 6 o'clock, and we had to drive a couple hours out to Harold's family on the Long Island Expressway. So as I'm driving along in the LIE and we're getting there, it's about 8 o'clock at night, I've realized I've just driven 2 hours with my lights off. But Hayden fell asleep right away, so he didn't even notice. He ended up making the home visit, and it worked because when Harold made the campus visit, and we were going downtown for lunch, and so I was driving my car, and we stopped and parked out front of wherever we're going to eat. And I just left the keys in the car and walked away. He said, "Coach, where are you going?" I go, "We're going to go eat." He said, "You didn't lock the car? You left the keys in there." I said, "This is Iowa City." He said, "Wow." So I don't know if you'll remember that or have that had any impact on his decision. Much different than what he grew up with.
Someone else mentioned that. Who was it? It was the O-line coach later after O'Hara.
Frank
Verducci. So
Yeah.
he took one of the crews to Iowa City. I think it was Slutzker. He's watched this, and they just walked downtown and they just saw people say hi.
Yeah.
And this isn't East Coast. This is a different world over here, and they're friendly to people, and you don't even know who they are, and they're going to say hi to you, and they're not heads down. And so that made an impression.
Is that beef? I think that might have
It
been.
was beef.
Yeah.
Mike Ferroni. That's right.
And
I'm interested to hear about the kind of recruiting process from the inside. So you would go out and from the different magazines and wherever else, and people calling in and sending tapes and all that stuff. And so you would pick a bunch of guys that you were like, okay, I like these guys. And then everyone decided on it, or Coach Fry did it, or what was that process like?
There was various ways that they got onto the board. A lot of the kids, if they were from Iowa or the surrounding states, you knew about them because as you go to recruit, when there's a kid 2 years younger than you, either your coach is going to tell me, or while I'm watching you, I'm going to see him on film and realize there's a guy we got to keep track of. So that's why it's important the guys are successful. You have a recruiting person who's in the same area for a period of time because he gets to know the coaches, he gets to know the players. So first of all, we knew going in the strategic situation, okay, where are we losing some of our best players? And Hayden always said, look, if we're going to lose 2 running backs, we need to make sure we replace them, even though we knew that they may not play right away. But that was part of where are the weaknesses in the current squad and the upcoming folks. And then secondly, you would have players that you'd rank. He'd ask me, okay, who are the top 5 players in my area? And I would say, these guys, here they are. And then the tough thing was trying to get the position coach to look at the film. And you didn't want to waste their time on guys that were questionable. But you want to make sure if we're recruiting a linebacker, Bill Brazier had to sign off on it. Or if it was a quarterback, Coach Patterson sign off on him. And once you got to that point, the rules are pretty strict about when you could go out and start offering scholarships. It's a lot looser now. But you needed to know. I remember when I was recruiting, I was a tight end coach, and I knew who we needed, and Scott Slutzker was the top guy we were recruiting. The first morning, whatever that was in December, we could be on the road. I flew into New Jersey the night before, and I was at his house at 7 o'clock in the morning the next morning to see him and visit with him and his family. So you'd ranked him. And then you're right, you brought up a good point. A lot of times it came down to, we have a couple of scholarships, what do we do? And that's when Coach Fry would want to step in. And he'd always look at the family, if they're an in-state kid, if their dad was a Marine, and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
He joked
Mike.
about that was important. And
Wow.
I'll never
Mike sealed the deal for me. That's impressive. Yeah, my dad was a Marine.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the funnier ones was we were trying to decide on what to do with Randy Reiners, whether to offer Randy or not. Randy Reiners was from Fort Dodge.
Yep.
And Donnie had some guys he was recruiting as quarterbacks, and he was pep on them. And Hayden kind of sensed that we were going back and forth. So he came into my office and he said, put the film on. So I put the film on Randy Reiners, and he watched it for about a half hour. He He's as exciting as the Texas State Fair. Let's offer him. And that's a little bit how he was. He was a good guy. So that's some of that time. That's how it came out. And recruiting is not an exact science. Even though today you've got all kinds of tape. Earlier on, you got camps, you got 7-on-7s and all that stuff. You're still not sure what you're getting in terms of the player mentally. But yeah, you had to be ready. You had to recruit year round. You couldn't always leave campus, but if you wanted to have a good program and be a solid coach, you had to be recruiting or be aware of things year round. But yeah, that was something I didn't mind that much because I didn't mind driving. One of the things I enjoyed about fundraising, going back to if I'm recruiting and I've got to be at your house tomorrow morning and it's snowing like hell, there's a blizzard, I still got to go. I got to be there. Because if I don't go, the guy from Iowa State might be. But when you were fundraising, it didn't matter. If it was snowing, they said, no, you don't need to come. Don't worry about it. So that was a little different. Yeah, but I think recruiting's changed with the portal and the NIL. It's not like you're going to recruit many kids anymore to develop them. The coaches, and rightfully, they got to look at it and, hey, I got to win now. So I need a guy that can come in and play right away. And that's the tough part of what Kirk has done so well over the years to develop players. I think we're hanging in there, but it's such a different ball game now.
So your sons were the same age as Tim, Dwight?
They were a couple years behind him. Now, they kind of rode his coattails, not all sobbing in track. All they had to do was get the baton to the next guy, and Tim Dwight was going to anchor, so who cared?
They were pretty darn good. They held their own pretty well.
Some good players and some good teams, and he was quite a competitor.
Could you have watched as a parent and knowing that a recruit is there? How did that work with like rules? Not that you needed a whole lot of evidence that Tim was a pretty good athlete, but could you
Brian,
go to events or games there?
I always wanted to watch my sons play. And if I happened to bump into Tim and say hi, that was all right.
Yeah.
I was just cheering for him. No, I tell you, one of the greatest high school games I ever saw was in the playoffs when City High played Bettendorf. Tim Dwight versus Tavian Banks. I'm telling you.
We had Tavian on, and we talked about that game, and we found the video on YouTube.
City High kicked the ball off to him. I don't know, but it was coming back as fast as it went down there. Yeah, that was a great game. We all knew what was going on. I would see the boys. I didn't go out of my way with Tim. Sometimes guys, they just get tired of it, and I could tell he was getting worn out about it. And so we didn't get too crazy, but it was fun to be able to watch those guys play. And I think my sons were sophomores when that happened. And they got brought up on the varsity, but then maybe they played 2 games in one of the playoff games. On the track team, it was unbelievable. The stuff they could do. When he was a freshman, so picture this. I'm the running back coach. I've got Ryan Terry, Cedric Shaw, Tavian Banks, Tim Dwight, and Damani Shakur. Remember Damani Shakur?
Damani,
for sure.
Damani was a hell of a kid. And I got these other guys. And of course, running backs, they all want to carry the ball 20 times a game. And this wasn't going to happen. But I'll tell you 2 little things. Tim's first game, so we're playing, I can't remember.
Central Michigan.
Yeah, and we're way ahead. And the way that Carl, I talked a lot to Carl Jackson and got some tips. And what he would do late in the game, he didn't go by series because you never know how long. If I said, okay, Brian, you're in this series and Nick the next one, there may not be another series. So we just went 3 plays at a time and came out. And so Tim comes in the game the first time and the place goes crazy. All right. And he carries the ball a couple of times and we get down close inside the 5. His 3 plays are up and he understands. So he comes off the field. And all of a sudden everybody's booing. And Dwight Shakur comes in. Were you guys there? Were you on the team?
Yep. That was our second year, sophomore.
They're booing and I'm in the head press box. All of a sudden I hear this voice, Coach Triplett. It says, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing to me? Can you hear the crowd? Coach, he's I don't care. Get him. So poor Damani, when he's in there, Hayden runs a quarterback sneak. And then Tim goes back in, the place goes crazy, and he scores a touchdown. I felt bad for Damani, and I caught a lot of hell for that. But I get it.
Probably the right call.
Here I am. I've got those 3 backs, Ryan, Cedric, and Tavian. Tim's number 4. So what does he do during practice? Scout team. That didn't go well the first time I sent him down, and Hayden's walking back up. What are you doing? It was fun. And poor Damani, he came into me once. He said, Coach, I had to give him credit. He came in, he said, Coach Triplett, I want to tell you, I think you're making a mistake. I should be playing more. And I said, Damani, buddy, I got to be honest with you. I get where you're coming from, but it's just not going to happen. The 4 guys ahead of me. So it was
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah,
Some of the best talent, especially at the same time. It's a huge room to try to find carries for.
yeah, and it was tough. That was one of those deals.
Was it 94? He got the chance to play and had a really good game. The last game he got in and actually carried quite a bit because there was injuries and stuff. And
Okay.
I think he had over 100 yards or something.
Oh,
He
good
had
stuff.
one really good game. Maybe it was 95.
Yeah, might have been 95. Yeah, and then I had Kent Call and Paul Kiowa and Lou Montgomery at fullback.
Rodney Filer was there.
Big Bod, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Rodney played, he's in Des Moines, I think.
Yeah,
And Kent Call is back in Iowa City. His son plays for City High.
that's right.
And
Oh,
I saw
nice.
that.
Cliff King was in that mix too.
Cliff was one of those guys that I still have a lot of respect for him because he walked on and he got a scholarship. And he had played a couple of games with a bad shoulder, but played hard and did a good job. And he ended up scoring 2 touchdowns in Hayden's game, but Hayden got his 200th. And that was a big deal. Cliff's done great at Nike.
He is, yeah.
Keeps moving up. He can be
He's
running
the-
it someday.
He's the head of Jordan brand, I think, in marketing or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
A month or so ago out here.
Yeah. He was a solid kid. So that was a good group of guys.
You had some younger guys or older guys too. So when you first started in 89, was that the first
Yeah.
season? You were doing tight ends. You talked
Yeah, I
about that.
John Palmer, and he was okay. And then Michael Titley, Bernie got him in from junior college, and he was a good athlete. He ended up being all Big Ten. And then who else did we have?
Guy from Monticello.
Bobcat.
Yes.
Russell, yeah.
Mark
was-
Russell.
Mark Russell.
Mark Russell's a good guy. He was a decent player.
Yeah.
And
He's my roommate for a while on the road. Yeah,
Oh.
we'd go have, wake up and watch fishing shows before we had to go to the game. Yeah.
And I remember we're playing the year we went to the Rose Bowl, and we're going through stuff, and alignments and rules. And Matt was one of these thinkers. He said, Coach, what happens if Reitman lines up across from me? He was the Outland Award winner that year on defense. And he's 6'6", 280 or something. I said, Whit, that's never going to happen. Sure enough, we're in the Rose Bowl, and Whit gets in there, and about the second play he's in there, guess what? They shift the front, and there he is in his 2-point stance, looking across at this Outland Award-winning guy in his 4-point stance, and comes across and knocks Whit back about 3 yards. And we ended up making some yards, but Whit came running off the field and looked for the coach's phone right away. He's on the phone. He said, Coach Triplett, I thought you said it never going to happen. I said, yeah, you're right. And
That was that. You're saying it was Steve Ettman, right? Is that who you're talking about?
Irby.
Irby.
Geez, you
Uh,
probably look thinking about what? Okay, Steve Ettman, yes.
Saying, what did you think of the stand-up tight end?
When I was in my interview, and if you've ever been in an interview and your potential future boss says, do you think we have trouble doing this? No, not at all. I don't have any problem with the 2-point stance, Coach. And I understood that was part of the offense. And we adjusted. We were not a heavy off-tackle team, so we were not always blocking down, which was the toughest block to execute out of a 2-point stance. But really, I tried to coach it to where we had gave us some advantages, because one of the things is if you're standing straight up, it gives you about 2.5 more feet to move on the line. It's in the neutral zone. You can still move back and forth. So if we were going to try to get off the line quick, we'd take all the line of scrimmage we could. If we needed to finesse a little bit, we'd back off for a little bit. And the guys were good enough athletes. Mike Titley and Al Cross were good enough athletes. Plus, I did understand why we did it, so we could see the coverage with the blitzes and the stunts. So, yeah, if we'd have been a heavy power team, it'd be a little different. But you see a lot of tight ends now are in 2-point stance when they're motioning or lining up out there. I think Iowa was ahead of its time doing that. And then, of course, it was a good recruiting point, because if I'm not sure, you played tight end too, right? Tight end and punter. One of the recruiting points to a tight end said, look, we don't treat you just as another tackle. We let you stand up in a 2-point stance so you can get free and catch passes, which was true.
What was your philosophy on coaching? How do you approach it? And what was key things you were trying to drive, and how your relationships built with players?
I tried to go beyond just the coaching. I didn't want to try to be buddy, but I didn't want to see how you're doing, how's your parents doing, how's your dad doing. What the hell are you wearing that stuff for today, Brian? You look like stuff like that. Joke around a little bit.
Most clothes clash. Why are you
Yeah.
wearing-
But I always wanted to make sure they were clear on what their responsibilities were and try to keep it as simple as I could and try to be as positive as I could. And when you're winning and you have a good group of guys around you, it's easy to be positive. My philosophies was different coaching the tight end than it was running back. The running backs, they don't need a lot of technique. If you got the right running backs, you don't need to coach them how to run the ball at our level, at that level. There's a little more technique work involved with the tight ends and tackles because of the blocking. And you always had to find out really what a person's mental strengths were and how to approach them as best you could. Yeah, so I would tell you this, whether I'm fortunate now, I have kids from Assumption, kids from Heelan, kids from South Dakota, kids from Iowa State and Iowa. So it's great when I run into them because those are the kind of things that really make the memories positive, the types of kids that I work with. And we've got our 50-year reunion for the Heelan thing this year, 40-year reunion for the South Dakota team that went to the playoffs. And that's fun stuff to see those guys again and see how they're living their life. A lot of them done really well.
And your son was head coach at South Dakota later as well? Did I remember that?
No.
Assistant. Okay.
Yeah. And then he went from there. He went back to the Twin Cities. And then he went to Eau Claire, where one of his friends coached. And then he got out after that. And I still have some friends up in Vermont. We were there 10 years. And it's a good place. We enjoyed it there. But they're always going to have to struggle to beat North Dakota State and South Dakota State. And it's a little thing. I-29 goes up the eastern part of South Dakota and North Dakota. Brookings and Fargo are right on I-29. So they're good towns. Vermillion, where USD is, about 6 or 7 miles off the interstate. And it's amazing the difference that makes. And you think about that, there's just not as much growth there, but they've done a great job. They've redone their dome, and they've done a great job of recruiting there. And they're competing as good as they can. I'm not sure what will happen as the future moves forward on this deal, but we'll see. But the only coach we have now in the family is my son-in-law, Garrett, at Iowa City West.
All right. So you still breaking down tape? You still watching all the games or no?
I do. I've got my Huddle account on the West High stuff. So I get those games. I get to watch those. And I tell you what I learned. The last thing a guy needs is his father-in-law telling him what to do, no matter what it is, especially coaching. So I cut back on that. He doesn't need 25 comments from me on Saturday morning at 7 o'clock. But I do say a few things every once in a while. And he's kind enough to listen. But yeah, I like watching the Huddle and keeping track of that. And I'm not sure, my grandson, he may end up going out to Golden West Community College in Huntington Beach, California. He may go out there.
This is Drew Larson?
Yeah, Drew Larson.
Okay.
Yeah. He hasn't decided yet, but we'll see. So I'll probably be following him on Huddle and see how that goes. And then, of course, on Saturday, I'm watching whatever college games, and it's easier for me to yell at the television. What are you doing that for? Yeah. I tell you what's amazing is you guys probably, in the last 4 or 5 years, how the college kicking game has changed with the rugby. That's unbelievable.
Crazy.
The skill is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah,
You're just saying we get beat out so clearly now with some of the talent these kids have now.
Yeah, that's a whole different ballgame the way they do that. You can get a lot more yardage on the ball. Yeah.
A few more questions for you. What was it like, because we saw Hayden, the head coach, who was motivating, telling jokes, but we know that you guys took a lot of the brunt of the behind the scenes stuff. So how do you manage that relationship with him? And did you know him at all before you got the job? Just-
We may have shaken hands a couple of times. He always put the players first, which I appreciated. And we were the adults. We were getting paid. So if anybody's going to get blamed, it should have been us for mistakes. But he was a little different than Earl. Earl was right in your face. He was a face-to-face guy. And Hayden was a little bit of a psychologist. And never quite sure what the mood's going to be in a Sunday meeting after a game. Some of you guys did a great job. And you know what? Some of you guys need to back up to the pay window from this week and you know who you are. So you weren't sure whether you're in the doghouse or whatever. And you didn't want to be the first guy if he asked, okay, Brian, how did your players play yesterday? Because if you said good, you say, well, how come we lost? Or if you said bad, well, why have I got you coaching? You had to learn from that. But he didn't get too crazy involved with your techniques. He was into plays, and he had some good ideas. And sometimes I get a little nervous when he comes in on Thursday morning of game week with 5 more plays. But there's a lot of times where they work pretty well. And he always, like I said, the key thing, he had the players in his heart first, and he never really got after the players. If you were the coach, he expect you to take care of a lot of the things yourself. Yeah, I enjoyed that. And of course, he gave me a chance to coach at my alma mater. So he took a chance on me, and I've been forever grateful for what he did. And our life has been wonderful since we've come back to Iowa City.
Did he ever fire you in the game during the game or?
Many times. Yeah, and since, some of it they deserved. Okay, did I deserve it? No, but did my guy screw up? Yes.
You took the brunt for us. Appreciate that.
That's all right. That's why we're grown men and we got paid for that. And he would forget it too. He never let that sit too long. So yeah, I appreciated what he did for me. A couple of times for 4 or 5 years afterwards, he let me MC the end of the year banquet. When we had the awards banquet, I did that. So I felt bad when he had to go, but I think he realized it was time for him to step back. But he did a lot to turn it around.
I had another question on your grandfather. Did you have any stories? Because I did find some story about him with the pool at the university.
They had some
Are you
fumes.
familiar
came
with
in
that?
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, fumes, and they had to go out and resuscitate him.
Jeez.
Yeah. That's what I remember. And then, hold on for a second. I'm not sure if you guys can see this. So this is the 1917 Hawkeye.
The yearbook.
There
Oh,
in the lower, right there at the bottom is my grandfather. Can you see him at the lower
Yep.
right?
yeah, for sure.
It says here, with his 190 pounds, Tripp stopped nearly every play directed at him. Late in the season, he was shifted to tackle, where he played just as well as he had at the end. He was generally the first man down under punts, and very seldom allowed a man to dodge it. Yeah, and so then he also ran track. And then he ended up, after that year, he went over to Europe and fought in the war. He fought in the Argonne Forest in World War I, towards the end of World War I. Yeah. And then he was an interesting guy, distant. I don't know if you remember the old field house. They used to have those steel girders in there. He worked for a company that put the girders in. And yeah, he was quiet, but interesting guy to talk to. And so a little bit, now you're going to get into the family stuff. This is a little bit offhand, but so on my dad's side, her mother married a Donnelly. Okay, or she was a Donnelly. All right. And there was an Irish settlement up in north of Iowa City. And so this Donnelly family, of course, they're the family that started Donnelly's Tap. I don't know if that was around here when you guys were in Iowa City or not.
Not sure what.
I think so.
It might have been gone by then.
Okay.
But anyway, I've got articles about the family and how in 1935, Donnelly's Tap was the first tavern to serve green beer in Iowa City that many years ago. So I've got some connections there.
Very cool.
I think that's great. It's a lot of great stories. We really appreciate you coming on. I know it's getting late.
Sure.
Yeah.
You guys have a good evening. and
Yeah.
you
Thanks.
do
Yeah,
well.
we're hoping that one of your ex-players gets in the Hall of Fame too. So we're hoping Cedric gets elected.
Is he up for it?
He was on the ballot this
I
year.
I
So
haven't
yeah.
seen it. How about that?
Yeah. So
Yeah, I
hopefully-
think they already finished voting. He got up for it. We just don't know if he got enough votes this year. So we'll see.
I hope he does.
hopefully,
Still
yeah.
the leading rusher for
Yeah.
Iowa football.
Yeah, and it's been how many years?
Almost 30 years.
Crazy. You guys have good evenings.
All right, you too. Take care.
Thanks,
Thanks so
Coach.
much.
Thanks for taking the
Great.
time. Go Hawks.
Yeah. Go
Yeah,
Hawks.
Go Hawks.